Golf is at a major crossroads right now. Brian Rolapp is trying to run the PGA Tour like a modern sports league, changing the schedule and pushing new money. But Jack Nicklaus sees a massive problem with this new direction. The Golden Bear is not just going to sit back and watch the game he loves get changed on a spreadsheet. He is stepping up to expose a huge flaw in the CEO's plan, and he is doing it right in front of the top stars in the game. You might think this is just another disagreement over tournament dates or prize funds. It is much bigger than that. Nicklaus is defending the actual soul of professional golf against a corporate takeover. Legacy events that took decades to build are being pushed aside for quick television ratings. When a legend like him decides to draw a line in the sand, the entire tour has to pay attention. But the public comments are just the beginning. The real explosion happens behind closed doors, where the truth about the tour's future is finally laid out on the table. I believe this is the exact wake-up call the tour needs, so tell me in the comments if you agree or think Jack is overreacting. If you want the real story behind the golf headlines without the corporate spin, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. Jack didn't just stop at a simple press conference warning, because his next move forced the entire player council into the room. That room was filled with the biggest names in the sport. They were all looking at the exact same problem. The new leadership wanted to completely rewrite the tournament calendar starting in a couple of years. Players were starting to panic. They planned to group all the massive payouts into a few exclusive weeks. The rest of the year would just fight for scraps. Traditional tournaments suddenly found themselves pushed to the back of the line. Competitions with decades of history were being treated like minor league stops. This was the exact moment the real issue came into focus for the squad. You cannot just erase 50 years of prestige because a spreadsheet says it is more efficient. Golf relies on the weight of its history, and fans tune in for the legacy of places like Muirfield Village or TPC Toronto. Think about the specific tournaments that were on the chopping block. Events like the Memorial, the Canadian Open, and the Colonial are not just regular weeks on the calendar. They are the heartbeat of the summer schedule. When you play at these courses, you feel the history in the ground. The fans have been coming to these exact spots for 40 or 50 years. If the new leadership turns these historic venues into minor league stops, the local volunteers will stop showing up. The sponsors who have supported these events for decades will pull their money. You are not just changing a date on a screen. You are actively destroying communities that have built their entire local economy around hosting a PGA Tour event. The players understand this because they see the empty grandstands when a tournament loses its prestige. Brian Rolapp saw these tournaments as simple television slots that needed to be optimized for maximum revenue. Jack Nicklaus saw them as the actual foundation of the sport. When you strip away the history, you are left with a generic product that means nothing to the people watching at home. You cannot manufacture legacy overnight. The players knew this truth better than anyone, sitting in those locker rooms and hearing the whispers about which stops might get downgraded next. Most players just stayed silent and accepted the extra cash, while one specific star was already quietly building a case against the CEO. The Player Advisory Council was trapped in a terrible spot. They wanted to protect the game they loved, but they also needed to secure their own financial futures. Speaking out against the new boss could cost them their spot in those exclusive, high-paying events. It was a classic trap designed to keep everyone compliant and silent. Inside those private meetings, frustration was quickly becoming impossible to ignore. The top stars realized that if they did not push back now, the traditional calendar would be gone forever. Finding a true legend to challenge the narrative became their only real option. They needed someone whose name carried more weight than the entire corporate board combined, someone who did not care about keeping a corporate job. They needed a champion to speak up, finding the most powerful voice in golf history, ready to take the lead. That voice belonged to Jack Nicklaus, and he chose the perfect stage to deliver his message. He did not call a special press conference or leak a story to the media. Instead, he used his own platform at the Memorial Tournament. This event is his baby. He built it from the ground up, and it stands as one of the most respected stops on the entire calendar. When reporters asked him about the tour's new direction, he did not hold back. He looked directly into the cameras and stated he was not exactly in favor of what the leadership was doing. He did not yell or make wild accusations. He simply laid out the facts. He explained that bunching up all the big events destroys the rhythm of the season. He pointed out that taking history away from traditional stops hurts the local communities and the volunteers who make the game possible. His words were calm, but the message was incredibly sharp. The media picked up those words immediately, yet the real target of that message was waiting in a private meeting just days later. By speaking out at his own tournament, Nicklaus completely changed the game. He forced the golf media to ask Brian Rolapp about the plan every single day. The CEO could no longer hide behind closed doors and push his agenda quietly. He had to defend a highly controversial schedule change on national television. This public pressure was exactly what the frustrated players needed. They finally had a shield. If the boss was going to be angry about pushback, he would have to deal with Jack Nicklaus first. The reaction inside the player locker rooms was immediate and electric. When the news of Jack's comments hit their phones, the mood completely changed. For months, the players had been whispering about their frustrations, afraid of losing their tour cards or getting fined. Hearing the Golden Bear speak out so clearly gave them a massive psychological boost. They realized they were not alone in their thinking. The veteran players started talking to the rookies, explaining why this schedule change was a trap. The younger guys, who were mostly just focused on making money, suddenly understood the bigger picture. The locker room transformed from a place of quiet compliance into a united front. They started drafting their own counter-proposals, using Jack's public statements as the foundation for their arguments. But the public comments were only the opening move. Nicklaus knew that talking to the press was not enough to change a corporate plan. He needed to look the CEO in the eye and explain why this path would ruin the product. He requested a face-to-face meeting at Muirfield Village. This was his home turf. He wanted the conversation to happen on the grounds of the very tournament that proved his point about legacy and tradition. Rolapp thought a quick handshake would fix the problem, completely misreading the man sitting across from him. When the two men finally sat down, the dynamic was entirely different from a normal corporate meeting. Rolapp was used to dealing with agents, broadcasters, and sponsors. These people care about money and television ratings. Nicklaus only cared about the golf. He did not want to discuss profit margins or broadcast windows. He wanted to talk about the soul of the game. Nicklaus laid out a very simple argument. He explained that golf is not like football or basketball. You cannot just move the games around to fit a television schedule without losing the fans. The fans care about the history of the courses. They care about the traditions that have been built over generations. If you turn the PGA Tour into a generic series of made-for-TV events, you lose the very thing that makes golf special. He told Rolapp that his spreadsheet model was fundamentally flawed because it ignored the human element of the sport. Nicklaus explained that golf requires a natural rhythm that football simply does not need. In football, you play one game a week, and the rest of the time is for recovery and media. In golf, the players are constantly moving, practicing, and competing. If you bunch all the big money events into a single month, you burn out the athletes. You also confuse the casual fans who tune in every single weekend. Nicklaus pointed out that the beauty of the PGA Tour is its consistent presence on the calendar from January to August. By trying to create artificial peaks, Rolapp was actually creating massive valleys in viewer interest. He told the CEO that you cannot force fans to care about a made-for-TV event just because the prize fund is slightly higher. They want to see the best players on the best courses, week after week, building a narrative that lasts all season. The CEO realized he could not just bulldoze the Golden Bear, as the conversation quickly shifted from a simple schedule dispute to a battle for the game's future. This was the exact moment the power dynamic in professional golf changed forever. Rolapp came into the meeting expecting to give a quick presentation and get a signature of approval. Instead, he found himself being educated on the core values of the sport by the greatest player to ever live. Nicklaus was not asking for permission to complain. He was delivering a final warning. He made it perfectly clear that the top players were completely united against this new schedule, and they had the history of the game on their side. The meeting did not end in a shouting match. It ended with a very uncomfortable silence from the CEO. Rolapp had to go back to his office and realize that his grand plan had a massive hole in it. He could not sell this new schedule to the fans if the greatest legend in the sport was publicly tearing it apart. The exposure was complete. Nicklaus had successfully proven that the corporate model was failing to understand the actual product. The players suddenly realized they had the leverage to demand changes, unaware the leadership was about to make a move that would test their new unity. Word of the Muirfield meeting spread through the locker rooms incredibly fast. The top stars finally had the proof they needed. Jack Nicklaus had stood up to the new boss and lived to tell the tale. This gave the Player Advisory Council a massive boost in confidence. They were no longer just a group of complaining athletes. They were now backed by the ultimate authority in golf. The players started to push back much harder in their own meetings. They refused to accept the downgraded status of traditional events. They demanded that the history of the game be respected in the new calendar. The corporate board was suddenly facing a unified front. The players knew that if they held the line, the leadership would have to blink first. The fear of losing their spots in the exclusive events was gone, replaced by the confidence that they were fighting for the right reasons. Armed with this new confidence, the Player Advisory Council completely changed their negotiation strategy. They stopped asking for minor tweaks to the prize funds and started demanding structural changes to the calendar. They presented a detailed plan that protected the top 20 traditional events, ensuring they kept their current dates and status. When the corporate executives pushed back, citing television contracts, the players simply pointed to Jack's public stance. They made it clear that if the tour went forward with the two-tier system, the top stars would simply play fewer events. They were willing to take a pay cut to protect the integrity of the schedule. This was a bluff the corporate board could not call. Losing the top stars for half the season would destroy the very television ratings they were trying to protect. Everyone was waiting to see if the tour would actually change course, or if this was all just an empty promise to calm the waters. The pressure on Brian Rolapp became unbearable. He had to go back to the board of directors and explain why his perfect plan was falling apart. He had to admit that he misjudged the emotional connection the fans and players have with traditional tournaments. The board realized that pushing forward with the original schedule would cause a massive revolt. It would damage the brand and drive away the core audience that makes the tour profitable. Slowly, the corporate machine started to shift. The leadership realized they could not just erase 50 years of history without facing severe consequences. They had to find a compromise. They started looking at ways to protect the status of the legacy events while still trying to create some high-profile moments for the television broadcasters. It was a messy process, but it was happening because one man refused to let the game be turned into a simple television product. The schedule might look different next year, though the real victory was not about dates on a calendar. This brings us to the actual payoff of this entire situation. The viewer wants to know what Jack Nicklaus actually achieved by exposing this plan. The answer is much bigger than just saving a few tournament dates. Nicklaus successfully proved that the PGA Tour cannot be run purely like a modern corporate business. He showed that the history, the traditions, and the emotional connection to the courses are the actual assets of the tour. Without those things, the television ratings and the sponsorship money will eventually disappear. He forced the CEO to realize that the players and the fans hold the real power. The corporate board can build all the spreadsheets they want, but they cannot force the fans to care about a generic product. Nicklaus protected the soul of professional golf at a time when it was being sold off for a quick profit. He gave the top stars the courage to stand up for the game they love, and he showed the new leadership that some things in golf are simply not for sale. The exposure worked perfectly. It fractured the corporate monopoly on the tour's future and brought the power back to the people who actually play and watch the game. Brian Rolapp will still try to modernize the tour, but he will never be able to do it by ignoring the history again. Jack Nicklaus drew a line in the sand, and the entire golf world stepped back to respect it. This is the kind of leadership that professional golf needs. It is not about making the most money in the shortest amount of time. It is about protecting the legacy of the sport for the next generation. When you have a legend like Jack Nicklaus willing to risk his comfortable relationship with the tour to speak the truth, you know the game is in good hands. He proved that the heart of golf is still beating strong, and no corporate spreadsheet can ever change that. If you appreciate the history of this game and want to see it protected, make sure you share your thoughts below. Do you think the PGA Tour is doing enough to respect its traditional events, or is the corporate takeover still a major threat? Drop your honest opinion in the comments right now. We read every single one, and we want to hear from the true fans who care about the soul of golf. Thank you for spending your time with us today and for caring about the real story behind the headlines. If you want to stay updated on all the real drama and news in professional golf without the corporate spin, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications. We will see you in the next video, where we will keep bringing you the truth about the game we love.